with offices in Portland, Oregon, the San Francisco Bay Area, and Philadelphia. The Devil's Interval is her second mystery and received starred reviews from both Publishers Weekly and Library Journal. Her first mystery, Edited to Death, introduced San Francisco journalist and amateur sleuth Maggie Ferrer. Thank you. She and her husband, a retired judge, live in Portland, Oregon. They have one son, one daughter-in-law, and one nearly perfect grandson. She was the recipient of the International Association of Business Communicators' First Distinguished Communicator Award. She had been cited by Inc. magazine as one of the West's new breed of entrepreneurs. She contributed the lead-off essay, Naked Parents in the Pool, to the 2008 anthology, Writing on Empty. She's also a frequent contributor to publications including the Chicago Tribune. In the literary community, Linda is a frequent interviewer for on-stage author events. She has interviewed Scott Turow for the Stanford Conference on Publishing, and Amy Tan, Gus Lee, and Whitney Otto for the Conference on Publishing. Whitney Otto for the San Francisco New Main Library series. She co-founded the popular Sweet Thursdays Literary Salon for the Lafayette Library and has been a garden columnist for Diablo magazine and was a regular contributor to the San Francisco Review of Books.
Thank you. Now, of course, you did miss the part where I played center field for the Yankees, and I was the coach. And it might have missed me because I had, a different outfit on. So thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. And I'm new to Portland. We've only lived here about 5 years, and despite what everyone said about how wicked and corrupt and evil people in Oregon thought Californians were, everyone has been so nice to me. So I want to say thank you for that. I don't fear for my life. I'm just happy to be here. So I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about why mysteries and about my character and what inspired her. And then we have a fabulous prize. So here's a question. The name of my second mystery is The Devil's Interval. Who knows what the Devil's Interval is? Okay.
It's a musical term.
Yes.
But I don't know what it means.
Okay, all right. Anybody got an enhanced idea to that? Want to build on that? Because otherwise...
Is that the same as the Devil's Chords, the progression of music?
It's very close to that. Very good. Okay, so I think, thank you for starting this, but I think you got closer.
No, that's fine.
All right. Okay, so, and if you have this t-shirt, this is a fabulous Maggie Fiore commemorative t-shirt. On the front it says, "The devil made me hum it." And on the back is the definition of the Devil's Interval.
Tritone.
It's a tritone, and if you've ever heard, in old World War II movies when the bad guys are coming and the ambulance goes, that is a tritone, and the medieval monks believed that if you played or sang the tritone, it would drive you mad. And so they forbade people from using it, and that's why it's called the Devil's Interval. In my story, the Devil's Interval is the name of a jazz club in San Francisco, because once jazz musicians discovered the Devil's Interval, people no longer thought it was a bad thing. And jazz musicians, as you probably know, you'd know, even if you don't know the name of the Devil's Interval, you'd recognize the sound as you modulate from one key to another. So, I too have a cold, I'm sorry, and it's not because I've been fooling around with anyone else in the room. I just want to be very clear. It's my own cold with my own germs. I have a day job, as many writers do, of course, but I love to write. I've always written. It's always been fun. But the thing I loved most was a little revelation I had. For a long period of time, I had contracts to do nonfiction books, and I did one on flowers, not how to grow them, but kind of what they mean and their role in literature and blah, 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 blah. Then I did a book on candles, same thing, on linens. If you want to know the role of the handkerchief in Italian opera, I am your girl. Oddly enough, almost No one ever wants to know that. But so I'd done all these kind of domestic goddess books, and then Martha Stewart went to jail, and I thought, you know, I need to move out of the domestic goddess era. And besides, my family was sick of my experiments with nasturtium pizza, which, by the way, is delicious. I just want to say that. So I'd always loved mysteries. I grew up, my dad was a big mystery fan. I grew up reading Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, Dorothy Sayers. Oh my gosh, Dorothy Sayers. Any of you ever read those books? I wanted to be Harriet Vane. I love those books. So I love mysteries, and I love cities. I love books that are set in cities, and then they treat those cities as characters. That's certainly the case. Mystery writers who write in Portland do that. San Francisco is a great mystery city. LA, where I grew up, and then got a hall pass and never came back, is also, you know, a great mystery city. The first time I went to Hong Kong, I felt like I knew the city because I had read John Le Carré's The Honorable Schoolboy, and I was like, I knew this place. I had that sense of place. So it's really important to me to write books that have a sense of place. And I write mysteries because I look around the room and I see that you all are people who have led absolutely perfect, blameless lives. You have never put a wrong foot. I, alas, am not such a person, and it turns out that there are other people like me in the world who, you know, things don't always work out exactly the way you want them to. But here's the thing about mysteries. Mysteries, even if they don't end happily ever after, because inevitably there's kind of a body in the room somewhere along the way, right? But they get resolved in some way. So even if they are not deeply satisfying in terms of, and they all lived happily ever after, it really is thrilling to be a careful reader, and mystery readers are very careful readers because they're always trying to get there before the author reveals all, right? And so it's very satisfying, I think. It's a way in which life gets whole again, even if it hasn't been exactly blameless and perfect. So that's one reason I like to write mysteries. So I got inspired to create a mystery about a woman who was a journalist, and I got the idea from her, going back to the perfection theory here. When I lived in the Bay Area, we had a thing called casual carpool, which my business partner always referred to as Linda trying to get picked up by serial killers. And you would go to the BART station or one of the other transit stations, and if you just couldn't face the ferry or the BART train or whatever it was, there would be a line of people like me who would need their car to drive into the city, but they wanted to have two other bodies in the car because then you could go through the fast lane on the Bay Bridge, right? And so this was a casual carpool that you'd pull up. And so what would happen inevitably is that if there'd be a line of people and there'd be a man and a woman, usually, I don't know, it's just like a little dinner party, and not to gender generalize, gentlemen, but the guy would get in the back seat and he would get out his device, or his Wall Street Journal, or he'd take a nap. The woman would get in the front seat, and apparently women chat. This apparently happens. And at first, these women were kind of inevitably significantly younger than I was. They were kind of like, that kind of mid-30, late 30, and they looked really great. They had the product bag, and they had the great shoes. They had those shoes, can I say this in this room? Those fuck me shoes. And the Christian Louboutin hot red on the bottom. They looked great, and they'd narrate their morning for me. They would already have gone for a run around the Lafayette Reservoir, 3.5 miles. They would have been on the phone tree for soccer treats. They needed to take something to work, so that they would either have baked cookies or they would have bought them and then messed them up so they looked homemade. And they would have had really good sex with somebody, right? All before 8 in the morning. And I would think, what? Was I that clueless when I was 35? I don't think I ever got 2 of those 4 things done. But inevitably also, by the time we would get to the Caldecott Tunnel, which is the kind of the way out of Contra Costa County into the city, these perfect girls would tell me something about their lives that would make me realize that maybe even they, no matter how fabulous they looked, were not perfect. And so I decided, you know, everybody writes about flawed perps, right? Because murderers tend to be flawed people one way or another. And I thought, I'm going to write about a flawed sleuth in a different way. So that's my character, Maggie Fiore. She's married to a sexy, handsome Italian tax lawyer. Those words will only appear together in my imagination in the same sentence. But that's joy writing, right? And she has 2 kids, and she starts out as a freelance writer, and by the second book, through a series of circumstances, The Devil's Interval, she becomes the editor of the magazine, because the editor, I can say this, although Phil lectures me about giving things away, I will only tell you that he gets off pretty early on in the book, and edited to death, which is the first book. So how much time do I have left? 5 minutes. Oh, fabulous. Okay, should I read or should I keep running my mouth? Read. Okay. Okay, so here's my story. In this book, in The Devil's Interval, there's a character named the Limousine Lothario, and he is on death row. He's a man who co-owns a jazz club with his mother, and he is called the Limousine Lothario because his limo service kind of specializes in serving Silicon Valley, venture capitalists, and often they are neglectful of their beloved sweethearts, and so he entertains them. But one day he does something very dangerous, which is he falls in love with one of these women. And so it's a story about what happens. This happens before the book even opens. She's found dead in the backseat of his limo. He's been tried, found guilty. We're in the appeal period, and a group of people inveigle Maggie, my character, to intervene because they know that this was kind of a society murder, that she has access to that world through her silly, shallow, but very entertaining little magazine. So I'll read you a little bit from the scene where she meets Travis, that's his name, at San Quentin. Anybody here been to San Quentin? Okay, well here's a fashion tip for all of us. You cannot wear an underwire bra to San Quentin. I just want to give you that heads up. And no one needs to speculate here on why do you need an underwire? I don't even, okay. So, all right, here, the book is funny, but I'm going to reject kind of a serious scene. So Maggie's meeting Travis Gifford for the first time. We shook hands and sat down. Gifford on one side of the table, Isabella, that's the lawyer, and me on the other. Pale, pale blue eyes, close-cropped graying blonde hair, faint freckles across his nose, and visible under the gold hairs on his forearms. He didn't look bodybuilderish like the correctional officers, but his shoulders were broad and straight, and suddenly a picture of a young Nureyev floated into my head. Muscles under artful control. I feel as if I know you already, Mrs. Fiore, he said. I've been reading your books, the ones you donated to the prison library. I remembered the bags of books, mostly old paperbacks and some battered college texts I packed up and sent to the death row library. I've got plenty of time to read, said Travis, and to pay very close attention. We get a lot of second and third hand books here. So I always read everything on the page, what people underline, what they write, everything. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. Want to know what I've figured out about you? I'll be quick. You don't like the romantic poets much, Byron, Shelley, those guys, hardly a mark on those pages. But you like the religious stuff, George Herbert, John Donne. If I were 19 and trying to get you into bed, I'd send you Andrew Marvell, but not the usual to his coy mistress. Travis held his hand up. And then he lowered his hand, palm cupped upward, and put it in front of me. I followed his eyes down to his palm, and he opened it slowly as if he were setting a firefly free to twinkle away into the air. There on his palm, written in ink, it said, Clora, come view my soul. Travis turned his palm face down on the table, leaned forward, and whispered, Clora, come view my soul and tell whether I have contrived it well. Now all of several lodgings lie composed into one gallery, and the great arras hangings made of various faces by Our Lady. that for all furniture, you'll find only your picture in my mind. Travis sat back and smiled, a prisoner in a cold, sterile room with big squared shoulders and an even bigger presence. His self-confidence was palpable and seductive. It took an effort to resist and an even greater effort not to feel invaded by the idea of a man in a cell memorizing a passage for me. The gallery, I said coolly, no wonder they call you Lothario. Nice parlor trick to memorize a poem I loved in college. Good thing I'm not 19 anymore. Why'd you give the book away, he asked. I have a hardbound copy of Marvell now, I said. I thought the paperback deserved a new home. So on it goes. She does end up taking the case, and she gets involved with Travis's mother, Ivory Gifford, who really runs this jazz club. And the book, in some ways, is about what parents will do for their children. You know, because what haunts Maggie is what if one of her boys were in this situation. And in the book, there's another parent, a father, who is also a big player. And that question that all of us ask, either about our own parents or about ourselves as parents, what would we do for our child, is an interesting question. And the way in which that gets resolved in The Devil's Interval made me keep thinking about that question as I went on. So thank you for inviting me.